What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's hero guide we're going to be covering someone who has been requested a lot lately by you guys, and that is Captain Phasma. I can't understand why she's been so highly requested by everyone in the comments of my other hero guides. She can be extremely hard to play as, and I do tend to struggle with her on certain maps as well. So hopefully this video can help a few of you guys improve when you're playing as Phasma. Now, Phasma is definitely a bit of an underwhelming character both in the movies and in Battlefront 2, but if you stick to her playstyle and take it slow, then you can still go on some mean kill streaks with her. She's definitely up there with some of the weakest heroes in the game, but at the end of the day she is still much better than any regular trooper, so like I said, she can still be very deadly. So anyway, in these guides I do cover both Galactic Assault and the Heroes vs Villain game modes as well. So I'll separate both game modes and touch on both the best star cards to use and the best tactics to use in each game mode as well. Before I get stuck into that though, I'll just quickly touch on Phasma's HP and abilities just so that any newer players out there can get a good idea of how she plays. So she starts off with 700 HP, which is the second highest of all blaster heroes in the game, and she does also have a health buff ability too, which I'll touch on later in the video. So in terms of her health, she's actually up there with one of the best in terms of the blaster users. As for her sprint speed, she's definitely not the quickest hero. In fact, I'm fairly sure she's actually one of the slowest characters in the game. But she does still move faster than any regular trooper class, so she still isn't slow by any means. Her weapon of choice is the Sonblast F11D, which is a very unique weapon in terms of the way it fires. It has an extremely high rate of fire and a low damage output, but it actually increases in accuracy the longer you fire it. As soon as you start shooting, you'll notice that the accuracy isn't very good, but as you continue to fire, you'll start to see the crosshairs moving in towards the centre. It's a pretty strange way to design the blaster, and it has copped a bit of flack from the community, especially around the time she was added to the game, as it was much harder to use, but since then it has been given a slight buff, and it's definitely a lot more accurate now than it was back when she first came into Battlefront 2. Now, moving on to her abilities, and she does have somewhat decent abilities, however they're definitely not the best in the game either. Her L1 ability is called Staff Strikes, and exactly as it sounds, this causes her to whip out a staff and swing it at her enemies, dealing huge amounts of damage if you can actually land a shot. The issue with this ability, which I'm sure most of you already know, is that the ability rarely even hits anyone regardless of how well you aim it. It has been fixed a whole heap since she first came to the game, but it definitely is still a little bit useless at times, so I'd suggest only using it when you absolutely need to. One thing that I've found when using it is to actually try and land one hit and then use the regular melee to finish off your enemy rather than to try and hit them again with the staff strike, as like I said, it can sometimes be a little inconsistent. In saying that, it does also deal more damage with each hit, and if you land 3 hits in a row, the third will deal a crazy amount of damage, so if you do feel comfortable enough to go for the 3 strikes on an enemy hero, then by all means go ahead, but just keep in mind that it could end up getting you killed. Her L1R1 ability is called Survivor, and this is actually the health buff ability that I was speaking about earlier on in the video. This awards Phasma with a temporary 200 HP each time you use it, meaning you can increase your health pool from 700 to 900 for a short period of time. This is probably her most useful ability when it comes to Galactic Assault, and despite what most people think, it's actually best to use it before getting into a fight rather than replenishing your health after a fight. Most people tend to use it to regen their health once they've already lost it, but it's much more effective to use it before a battle, because then any damage you take will be taken away from the health buff rather than your actual base HP, meaning you're much more likely to keep your health pool higher for longer. Her R1 ability is her Sentry Droid, and this one is honestly one of the most overpowered abilities in the whole game if you use it correctly. The droid acts like a normal turret similar to the officer class, revealing its target to you and your teammates and firing at anyone who comes within the line of sight. However, it also has the ability to shock anyone who comes within the area of effect. This is what makes it so powerful, especially in HVV or Hero Showdown, as you'll often find people playing as Phasma just camping right next to the turret, trying to lure enemies into their trap, and if they're successful then it's pretty much game over for the enemy. While this is a solid game plan in the Heroes vs Villain game modes, it doesn't work quite as well in Galactic Assault, as people will begin to catch on and take you or the turret out fairly quickly. I find it best to place it down near an objective or in a choke point and then head off to another area or objective, meaning you can almost be in 2 places at once. So that's pretty much all of the base tips covered. Now we're going to move on to some of the best tips to use when it comes to Galactic Assault. So to start off, I'm just going to go through some of her best star cards to use in Galactic Assault, and I'm not going to lie, she doesn't really have a great spread of star cards to choose from, so there'll probably only be 3 or 4 that I do touch on. With that being said, I do still recommend trying all the cards out for yourself and seeing which ones suit you the best. So the first card I'm going to recommend is the Easy Shot star card, and what this does is it reduces the heat build up of her blaster each time you get a kill with it. I'm going to show you guys the difference this can make. In this first clip I don't have the card equipped, and you can see the blaster does overheat fairly quickly, meaning it can be hard to take out a few enemies at once due to the low damage output of the blaster. Now with the card fully upgraded, you'll actually get a 60% heat reduction, meaning each kill will literally clear 60% of the builder. And as you can see in this clip, on the little white cooldown bar, each time I get a kill it drastically reduces the build up of the blaster. This is one of those cards that doesn't sound all that great on paper, but once you actually use it in a game, you'll find it hard to ever take it off, so it's definitely one that I recommend using at all times when you're playing as Phasma. The next card I'm going to recommend is the Safety First star card, and this one gives you more health when you use the Survivor ability. Fully upgraded, this is going to give you an extra 60 HP, turning 900 into 960 HP, which is actually much more helpful than it sounds. This card pretty much speaks for itself, so I'm not going to say too much about it, but it's definitely another card that I'd recommend using most of, if not all the time. Now the third and final card I'm going to recommend for Galactic Assault is her Not Hard Enough star card. And what this one does is it gives her damage reduction if she takes any damage while the Survivor ability is active. So pretty much as soon as you take any damage while Survivor is active, you'll get up to 50% damage reduction depending on how much you've upgraded the card, which lasts until the ability is no longer active. This card just goes a long way towards keeping your health higher, which obviously in turn is going to allow you to go on some much longer kill streaks and defend or attack objectives a lot easier. Now moving on to some tips for Galactic Assault, and the main one I have is to make sure you're playing extremely cautiously. Despite Phasma having a large health push, you can be taken out very quickly if you get yourself into a sticky situation, so you need to make sure you're always aware of your surroundings and not playing too aggressively. Now that doesn't mean camping like a Girl Scout at the back of the map, but more so trying to find the middle ground between playing aggressively and playing it smart. Getting yourself into a good position is the best thing you can do. She clearly plays better in close quarters areas due to the fire rate and range of her blaster, so try and find some close quarters areas where you can play aggressively yet still have a backup plan in case you do get overrun. Like I already mentioned, it's also a good idea to use the Survivor ability as often as you need to, because you'd much rather take damage out of the health buff rather than out of the actual health pool. So that's pretty much all of the tips for Galactic Assault. Now we're going to move on to some of the best star cards to use when it comes to the Heroes vs Villain game modes. The first card I'm going to recommend is the Not Hard Enough card that I mentioned for Galactic Assault, which is the one that gives her damage reduction while Survivor is active. Like I said earlier, this one is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but it's definitely one of the more useful ones in the hero game modes. The next card I'm going to recommend is the There Is No Escape card, and this one makes it so that whenever there's 2 or more enemies shocked by her sentry droid, the duration will actually be increased by up to 35%. Like I mentioned, the sentry is absolutely deadly in the HVV and Hero Showdown, so having an extended shock is only going to help you and your teammates get some easy kills. The third and final card I'm going to recommend for these modes is called Come Closer, and what this does is it increases the shock radius of the sentry once you've gotten 3 kills in a row. This is a good card to choose if you're going to try and go try hard mode and camp near the turret. Once you get 3 kills, it becomes even harder for your enemies to get near you, so this is another great card to use. However, I cannot stand players that just sit right next to the turret all game, so this is only really for those of you who are going to be playing try hard mode. Now the rest of her cards honestly are pretty trash in these game modes, however as I always say in these guides, I definitely recommend going into arcade and testing all of the star cards out just in case there are any that really suit your playstyle over the ones that I just mentioned. So now moving on to some tips for HVV and Hero Showdown, and just like I mentioned, using her turret can be the difference between winning or losing, and despite how frustrating it can be to play against the camping Phasma, it is a solid game plan at the end of the day. For me though, I get too bored of sitting still and waiting for enemies to come to me, so what I actually tend to try and do is find a good place to set up the turret, place it down, but then rather than sitting there like a little bitch, I'll try and hover around the map just a bit more and try and actually lure enemies towards me rather than just waiting. If I can beat them without needing the turret, then it feels a bit more rewarding and a lot less like I'm cheating, but then if I do get into trouble, I can always fall back towards the turret and help myself out a little bit. Now, it definitely isn't easy to do well with Phasma without her turret nearby, but I'm definitely not going to tell you guys to play a camping game style. So if you just play the way that I just mentioned, then you can still do it very well, and if you do start to struggle, then you do also have a backup plan to help you out as well. So anyway, that's going to be it for our updated Phasma guide, guys. Hopefully some of these tips helped you out, and if they did, then make sure to leave a like down below to help support the channel. Like I mentioned earlier, if you do have any tips of your own, then definitely don't hesitate to let everyone know. The more tips the better, so definitely feel free to leave your own tips down in the comments section. If you are new to the channel, then feel free to subscribe and make sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any Battlefront 2 guides or live streams. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.